Mommy, please listen to me just once. These were the words of 8-year-old Kunle. He said as he twisted the hem of his school uniform. He wanted to run, but to where? His mother, Ada, sat on the sofa, looking at reviews from her salon. She didn't even look at him for once. Not now, Kunle, she said. Can't you see I'm busy? But Kunle wasn't just seeking attention. His voice trembled. His small body was shaking under the weight of a secret too heavy to bear alone. This wasn't just drama. It was a desperate cry for help. One he prayed that someone listened to him. This is the story of a child's silent scream, a mother's blind ambition, and the devastating price of not paying attention. But it's also a story about the power of one person who finally stopped to listen, and how that changed everything. Sometimes the monsters don't hide under the bed. Sometimes they sit at the dining table, smile with us in family photos, and call themselves father. This is the story of Kunle. In a small town named Maji, there lived a boy named Kunle. He was just 8 years old and lived with his parents, Mr. Oko, and his mother, Ada. Their house was small but cozy, with bright yellow walls that used to make Kunle happy. But now, those same walls felt like they were closing in on him. Kunle was handsome and energetic, and had a lively smile that could light up any room. He had a special bond with his father, and many people in their neighborhood admired them. His mother always said, "I have 2 men in my house. They seem like a lovely and happy family from the outside." But sadly, Kunle's bright smile didn't last. It was replaced by pain and fear that no child should ever bear. He was never happy in his own parents' home. His pain began one afternoon when he was alone in his room. His father walked in and said, "My son, come and let me show you something." Kunle could hear children playing outside from his window. "But no one should know about this," his father continued. "This should remain a secret between us, and not even your mother should know about it." Kunle loved and trusted his father. This was the same man who taught him how to ride a bike and who bought him ice cream after school. He had no idea what his father wanted to show him, but why would he say no to his dad? Mr. Oko started having intimacy with his 8-year-old son. This was a boy and not even a girl. This kind of intimacy was unnatural and painful. He forced himself on the little boy, and Kunle would always cry and say, "Daddy, please stop. It's painful." But Mr. Oko paid no attention to him. Kunle had no idea what was going on. He only felt sharp pains after the act. He tried to run away several times, but he could never run faster than his father. He always caught him. At his age, Kunle was traumatized. His mother owned the biggest hair salon in the city. The salon smelled of hair products and coffee, and was always filled with the sound of hair dryers and women's chatter. Her shop was one of the busiest because she took pride in keeping everything clean and making her customers happy. She was always at the shop because most of her clients preferred her to do their hair instead of her workers. She loved her business so much that she gave all her attention to it. Their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Kemi, sometimes she heard Kunle cry through the tin walls. She would pause while watering her flowers, wondering if she has to check on the boy. One day, she decided to check. She knocked on the door and no one responded. She pushed it slightly to see if it was opened. The door opened and she went inside. As she stood in the hall, she heard Kunle's voice in a loud scream. She followed the voice and went to Kunle's room. What she saw took her breath away. Mr. Oko was on top of his 8-year-old son, and the boy was screaming on top of his voice. But Mr. Oko didn't bother about his cry at all. Mrs. Kemi was dumbfounded and rushed out without being noticed by anyone. She felt sorry for little Kunle and wanted to tell Ada about it. But she knew Ada. She was a no-nonsense woman and would always tell people to mind their business. So Mrs. Kemi said to herself, "It's not my business to interfere in other people's family matters." One day, Ada was sitting on their brown leather sofa, reading reviews from her clients as usual. The sound of her fingers tapping her iPad filled the quiet room. She smiled and replied to the reviews with joy. To her, this was all that mattered. While she was busy with her phone, Kunle walked up to her. His eyes were red from crying. "Mommy," he said quietly, "Daddy is not a good person. He always does something bad to me when you are not at home." His voice shook in fear. He tried again, but his mother was only smiling at the iPad in her hand. When he tried talking to her the third time, she got angry and shouted, "Kunle, go and sit down. Can't you see I'm busy? Don't come back here again." Kunle started crying. He wanted to tell his mother about the pain he was going through. He wanted to be heard and seen. He wanted protection from his father. His mother shouted at him again, "Kunle, if you don't leave my presence now, you will see the other side of me." She looked at him with the kind of eyes that Kunle understood immediately. He knew his mother, and he knew she wasn't joking about showing her other side, and he knew what her other side looked like. Anytime Ada got angry, he could do anything to him, including locking him up in his room for some time. Kunle went quietly into his room. His heart was heavy with a secret he was carrying all alone. At school, Kunle used to be the star of the class. His teacher, Mrs. Bello, noticed how he changed. He stopped playing with the other children during break time. He started sitting alone in the corner of the classroom, jumping at any sudden noise. His walking had changed, and he visited the washroom more frequently. From his looks, they knew Kunle was suffering. He looked scared and pale. When Mrs. Bello, his class teacher, asked if everything was okay at home, Kunle would just look down at his shoes and say nothing. But she knew something was wrong. "This is not Kunle," she said. Mrs. Bello decided to call Ada one afternoon to find out if there was a problem at home. "Good afternoon, Ada," Mrs. Bello said. Ada knew it was Kunle's teacher. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Bello. I hope there's no problem," she asked. "I noticed something about your son," Mrs. Bello said. "He has become very reserved and he looks sick. He is so unhappy and I'm worried. Is everything okay at home?" Ada laughed. "Don't worry yourself, Mrs. Bello. Kunle lacks nothing at home. Everything is fine. He's just being a naughty boy. And thank you for the concern. But I have clients to attend to. Do have a good day." And with that, Ada ended the call. Mr. Oko continued to act. He sneaked into Kunle's room every night and anytime his wife was out of the house. He always told Kunle to keep it a secret and that he just wanted to teach him what real enjoyment was. But Kunle would say, "Daddy, it's painful. I would tell Mommy. Please stop." And Mr. Oko would ignore him. He threatened Kunle, "If you tell Mommy or anyone, I will kill you and you will not see your mother again. Do you want to lose your life?" And Kunle would shake his head out of fear. His father, whom he trusted and loved so much, was the one putting him through all the pain, and his mother had time only for her shop. One evening, just before bedtime, Kunle decided to talk to his mother once again. He was so scared that night and in so much pain. And he knew that once he gets into his bedroom, his father will come again. He went to her and whispered, "Mommy, I want to tell you something about Daddy. Anytime you go. Then he remembered the threats from his father. "If you tell anyone, you will die." Tears started streaming down his eyes, and Ada shouted at him again, "Kunle, don't you have homework? Can't you see I'm busy? She said without looking at her son. What has your father done? Can't you see he's working so hard to take care of us? Go to your room, Kunle, and don't worry me. Kunle rushed back to his room and sat at the edge of his bed. He felt like an orphan in his own parents' home. Neither of them had his time. He kept all the pain and hurt inside him, and the only thing he did was to be silent and cry. He tried so hard to talk to his mother, but she always shut him up. That night, his father came to his room with some sweets and said, "Kunle, my boy, come to me. See what I bought for you. Have them and let's play our game." Kunle burst out into tears. "Daddy, no. It's paining me. I can't sit down. Please don't do it today." His father smiled and said, "My boy, don't worry. I will take you to a doctor tomorrow. All the pain will go away. Just come closer." Kunle tried to run, but his father caught him and had his way with him again. This particular night, Kunle cried so loudly because of the pain, hoping that his mother will hear him and come to his rescue. But Ada was fast asleep. She went to bed early every day because she had to go to her shop the next day. Kunle screamed till his voice was gone. His father finished, cleaned him up, and left the room. The next morning, by the time Kunle got ready for school, his mother, Ada, was almost on her way out to work. Kunle sat at the dining table with tears in his eyes. The poor boy had become a shadow of himself. The once happy, energetic, and lively boy became so quiet and moody. His walking had changed because of the pain, and when he wanted to sit down, he had to adjust himself in a way that would not be painful. Ada did not even notice the changes in her son. She said to him, "Kunle, be a good boy at school, okay? You have everything you need in your bag. I'll see you when I return." She didn't even notice the tears in his eyes. Mr. Oko was having the fun of his life at the expense of his son's life and future. As soon as Ada stepped out, Mr. Oko smiled at Kunle in a way that sent chills down his body. He knew what that smile meant, and the fact that his mother was out of the house meant he was in big trouble. Mr. Oko was a beast in human form. He had no sympathy for his own son. This pattern continued for some time. Kunle tried to tell his mother time and time again, but anytime he did, his mother brushed him off and shouted at him. She was too focused on her work and called him too dramatic for wanting too much attention. "Kunle, your father and I are working so hard to make life easy for all of us. Your main concern should be on your books and be a good boy. Do you lack anything at school? Do you know what other children are going through? Go and sit down." She would say this and dismiss him all the time. Kunle gave up after trying so many times. He stopped trying to talk to his mother. He kept all the pain inside, and sadly, he turned into a moody and dull child. Things went on until one day, his grandmother, Ade's mother, visited. She loved surprising her grandson and would always buy a lot of sweets for him. It was a peaceful Saturday afternoon, and Ngoze knew that her daughter, Ada, would be at the shop, but Kunle would definitely be home with his father. The main door wasn't locked, so she went into the living room. Just when she was about to call out Kunle, she heard a loud scream from his room. Her heart jumped. What could be happening to her grandson? Was he all alone in the house? Where was Mr. Oko? Ngoze rushed to Kunle's room, and what she saw almost sent her to her early grave. Here was Mr. Oko doing the unthinkable with his son, and the poor boy was screaming on top of his voice. But Mr. Oko ignored his cries and went ahead with the act. Ngoze could not believe her eyes. She screamed so loudly. She met her son-in-law, Mr. Oko, having intimacy with her 8-year-old grandson. She felt like her world was crumbling before her. She pushed Mr. Oko away and rushed to pick up Kunle from the bed. She took Kunle out of the room without saying a word to Mr. Oko. She held Kunle tightly in her arms. "I'm so sorry, Kunle. Only God knows what you've been going through." Ngoze called her daughter Ada and gave her the news. Within some minutes, Ada had arrived. When she saw her son, she burst out in tears. For the first time in a long time, Ada took a good look at her son. He was just a shadow of himself. He couldn't walk nor sit properly. And almost every 10 minutes, Kunle had to use the washroom. "I have failed you, my son," Ada said. "Is this what you always wanted to tell me? Tell me, how long has Daddy been doing this to you?" Before Kunle could speak, his eyes went blurry and he fell. Ada and Ngoze rushed Kunle to the hospital, and upon arrival, the doctor said he had a serious infection and needed treatment as soon as possible. Ada left her son with Ngoze and the doctors and went home to face her husband. Mr. Oko was lying quietly on the sofa as if nothing had happened. "You are a monster, Oko. How could you do this to your own son? What kind of pleasure are you looking for? You will rot in jail, trust me." Mr. Oko smiled and said, "Oh, Ada, my wife, you know you caused all this, right? You had no time for me and your son. All you cared about was your shop and money. I have needs, and Kunle was the only one available by then. So yeah, I don't regret any of that. And let me remind you, Kunle is not my biological son. He is your son, not mine. So stop calling him my son." Ada looked at her husband in shock. How did she end up with such a monster as a husband? No sympathy, no conscience. Mr. Oko continued, Don't worry about calling the police because you have no evidence against me." But Ada knew her husband was good at lying. So at the time she was confronting him, the police officers were already in the house and they heard everything Mr. Oko said. Before Mr. Oko could open his mouth again, the officers came out and took him away. After the police took Mr. Oko away, the healing journey began. It wasn't easy, but Kunle started seeing Miss Sarah, a kind counselor who helped children who had been hurt like him. Her office had soft chairs and lots of toys. She thought Kunle that none of this was his fault, and slowly he started to smile again. Ada took a hard look at life. She hired managers for her salon so she could spend more time with Kunle. They started having breakfast together every morning, and she would listen to all his stories about school. She learned that being a good mother meant more than just providing money and things. The whole community learned from what happened to Kunle. School started teaching children about safe and unsafe touches. Parents learned to listen more carefully to their children. Mrs. Kemi, their neighbor, joined a community watch group that helped keep children safe. Kunle grew stronger each day. Though the bad memories didn't go away completely, he learned that it was okay to talk about his feelings. His grandmother visited more frequently, bringing him not just sweets, but also lots of hugs and time to play together. The moral of this story is to always pay attention to all those little details around you. The way your child's voice changes, the sadness in their eyes, or when they try to tell you something important. Every child needs love, time, and someone who really listens to them. Money and success are good, but they can never replace the warmth of a parent's attention and care. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please do well to like, share, and leave us a comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification bell for more captivating stories like this.